Good afternoon, everyone. This is meeting number 35 of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security, Monday, October 25th, 2010. And I would remind everyone that today we are being televised, so please take your cell phones, your Blackberries, and put them on a mute mode or at least silence the ringtones so it doesn't disrupt the meeting. Today we're commencing on a study on the issues surrounding security at the G8 and G20 summits. In our first hour, we welcome the Honourable Vic Taves, Minister of Public Safety. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to appear on this issue. We also have as witnesses from the Privy Council Office, Mr. Ward Elcock, the Special Advisor, Marie-Lucie Morin, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister and Associate Secretary to the Cabinet, and from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Chief Superintendent Alphonse McNeil, Division Operation Commander to the 2010 on the G8, G20 Integrated Security Unit. And I understand, Mr. Minister, that you have an opening statement that you will share. You've appeared before the committee on many occasions. We thank you for that. And so you know the process as far as the questions, and we welcome your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to, of course, congratulate you on taking the chair of this committee, and certainly indicates the faith that committee members have in your qualifications and your abilities. I don't believe I've had the opportunity to appear in front of you as chair of this committee. In any event, it's a pleasure to appear before the committee to discuss security costs for the G8 and G20 summits, and as you've indicated, I am joined here today by very qualified individuals who will be able to provide the committee with the details of many of the questions that they may ask. They are senior officials who are involved with the preparation and provision of the G8 and G20 security, and I'm confident they'll be able to answer any questions you might have on the operational details of these summits, including the specific costs. The public safety portfolio had a number of partners involved in the security for the G8 and G20 summits. Altogether, the public safety portfolio received $790.1 million, which is approximately 85% of the security budget of $930 million. Funding to the agencies was as follows: $507.5 million for the RCMP to conduct planning and operations related to policing and security at the two summits, $278.3 million for public safety to administer the security cost framework policy and reimburse security partners for the incremental and extraordinary security-related costs they incurred, $3.1 million for the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service to provide intelligence support related to threats to the national security of Canada, including the G8 and G20 summits, $1.2 million for the Canada Border Services Agency to support activities associated with the provision of incremental border services and critical program support for the G8 and G20 summits. These important investments were necessary given the scope and magnitude of security operations associated with hosting two major summits back-to-back, which was unprecedented. And I believe all of us can be proud of what we accomplished at the summits themselves. At the G8 summit, a wide range of global challenges were addressed, including international peace and security, environmental sustainability, and green recovery, as well as the global economic recovery. It also resulted in member nations agreeing to the Muskoka Initiative, which will result in an increase in spending of $7.3 billion on maternal, newborn, and child health. In Toronto, Canada hosted the first summit of the G20 in its new capacity as the premier forum for international economic cooperation. Some of the many areas of advancement of this summit, including taking steps to safeguard and strengthen the economic recovery, laying the foundation for strong, sustainable, and balanced growth globally, financial sector reform, as well as promoting trade and investment. This represents significant steps to support the implementation of a common vision at the international level through the alignment of economic actions and decisions by G20 countries. Member nations accomplished a great deal at both summits, and I think it goes without saying that Canada can be proud of hosting such a massive undertaking when the eyes of the world were upon us. In order for these summits to unfold in an orderly fashion, an enormous and complex logistic and security operation was required. While this cost was higher than any of us would have liked, it was necessary. Leading the design and delivery of the security was the RCMP-led Integrated Security Unit. The security plan involved 10 federal government agencies and departments, including the RCMP, Public Safety Canada, Department of National Defence and the Canadian Forces, Health Canada, Transport Canada, the Canada Border Services Agency, the Canada Security and Intelligence Service, or CSIS, Industry Canada, as well as several provincial and municipal police forces. In order to put the magnitude of the summits and the related security operation into perspective, I would like to share some numbers with the committee. An integrated security unit led by the RCMP was struck and established to coordinate the provision of security. Included in the ISU were representatives from the Ontario Provincial Police, the Toronto Police Service, Peel Regional Police Service, and the Department of National Defence. There were more than 20,000 police officers and military personnel deployed to the unified command centres, as well as in and around the two summit sites, to ensure security for the internationally protected persons and their delegations. I think it's important to note that there were more delegates at these summits than there were athletes at the 2010 Winter Olympic Paralympic Games in Vancouver. Such a large security operation comes at a cost. Not only are large numbers of personnel required, they must also have the equipment necessary to perform their duties, as well as logistics and accommodations during the time of their deployment. This was confirmed by the Auditor General, who noted the following, and I quote, "Obviously, $1 billion is a lot of money, but I think we have to recognize that security is expensive. There are a lot of people involved over a long period of time. We may think that the meetings only last for a few days, but all the preparations involve extensive planning, extensive coordination for months before, and I think we have to be really, really careful." End of quote. Security is expensive, but a non-negotiable endeavour. The responsibility for hosting these events includes the provision of the appropriate level of security. Not only does Canada have a moral obligation to protect the participants to these summits, we also have an international obligation to do so under a United Nations Convention adopted in 1973 to protect internationally protected persons. Further to this, the Foreign Missions and International Organizations Act and Criminal Code of Canada require that security be provided for internationally protected persons. As a government, we also have a responsibility to be open and transparent about the costs, which is what we are doing. The government has been transparent about the total security budget from the onset. This observation has been confirmed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer in his assessment of planned security costs for the G8 and G20 summits released in June. He indicated in his report that Canada has been more transparent compared to other countries on the costs of security related to the summits. As you may be aware, the Auditor General is presently examining the security costs for these summits and is receiving full cooperation in the review. And this, Mr. Chair, is certainly has been my intent from the beginning. I've stated from the beginning that our books are open to the Auditor General for her review. At this time, members of the public safety portfolio, as well as security partners involved with the security for the summits, are currently in the process of compiling and reconciling all security expenses incurred as a result of the summits. Due to the audit and financial control mechanisms in the security cost framework policy, the final security cost may not be known for a number of months. This is because the policy reimburses security partners for incremental costs incurred that are reasonable and justifiable. Once the security partners submit their final financial claim for reimbursement, an independent audit will be conducted to ensure that only eligible costs are reimbursed. All claims for reimbursement are to be submitted to Public Safety by December 1st, 2010. Once these claims are received, the final audits will commence with the intent to have the process completed by March 31st of next year. Mr. Chair, I have committed to providing full disclosure of the G8 and G20 summit security costs in the past, and I am reaffirming this statement again today. This government is accountable to the Canadian public and committed to managing financial resources in a fiscally responsible manner. I can assure this committee that this government will respond to all questions posed on the security budget and costs and will deliver a full financial report on actual costs incurred once available. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have or defer those questions to members of this panel who are more qualified to answer these specifics than I may be. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We'll move into the first round of questions, 7-minute round, and we'll go to Mr. Holland.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for appearing before committee today and to the other witnesses. Minister, you don't get to the most expensive weekend of meetings in history without a lot of bad management, and I want to go through an anatomy of how things got so bad with you. First, when the initial decision was made to try to shoehorn this into the Cabinet Minister, to Tony Clement's riding Cabinet Minister in your government, and you tried to shoehorn it in there and it wouldn't fit, the decision was then made to split it into 2 venues, even after Minister Clement talked about how much money would be saved by having it in one venue. And it was dumped into Toronto at the last minute. And instead of listening to most of the advice at the time to put it on the CNE grounds or an area that was easy to secure and much less costly, it was put in downtown Toronto in the financial district. So the first question, Minister, is when you made the decision to shove the rest of this into downtown Toronto, whose advice did you do it on? Who did you talk to? And did you incorporate any of that advice into what you did? And if you did, can you be specific in terms of who you spoke to and what advice they were given?
Thank you, Mr. Holland, and I believe Mr. Elcock can answer that question in detail.
Well, Minister, if you're capable, I'd like to hear what advice you got.
Well, and I'm going to provide you with the advice right from the horse's mouth, Mr. Holland, so perhaps Mr. Elcock can speak.
Okay, but so if your answer is Mr. Alcock, was there anybody else other than Mr. Alcock that you received advice to?
I'd like Mr. Alcock to have an opportunity to answer the baseless charges that you've made.
Thank you, Mr. Alcock.
Mr. Chairman, the decision to not hold both meetings in Deerhurst was, at the end of the day, because simply the Deerhurst is too small to host a G8 meeting given the size of the meeting. It was beyond the capacity of the venue.
Mr. Chair, what I'll do, I'll come back to Mr. Alcock if I could. We only have the Minister for an hour. We're going to have the officials for the second hour. So if the Minister doesn't want to answer a question in the time he has allotted to him, we can come back to the officials in the second hour. Minister, when you made the decision to put this in downtown Toronto, you specifically,
Mr. Chair,
I'm just asking.
I just want to appeal to you. The question that has been put will be answered by the individual who is most competent to answer it, in the sense that that individual has all of the facts. Okay. I'm not going to get into a discussion with Mr. Holland, who simply wants to fight and make baseless accusations. He obviously doesn't want to hear the truth in this matter. This is typical of Mr. Holland's approach. And what I would suggest is, if he's truly interested in hearing from the experts on why the decision was made, Mr. Elcock is here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minister. I would remind all members that we have had the opening statement from our Minister that he has brought the top advisors, whether national security, RCMP, or special advisors, specific to answer questions. And at every meeting that I've been with ministers. It is their ability to put the question to the individual who can best answer it. So,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Chair, hopefully you paused the time. Did you pause the time? Look, Minister, you're here for an hour, and it's my intent to get at the rationale behind your decision-making. Of course, the rest of the witnesses will be here for an additional hour. It's our intention to certainly pose questions to them. So if there's a question you feel that you don't have an answer to, then you want to put it to your officials, then just let's move on, and we'll ask that question later. Do you not feel, and let me just ask this to you directly, in terms of a personal opinion, that all of this was entirely predictable? That by shoving it in downtown Toronto, in the financial district, not listening to the City of Toronto, not listening to police, that it was entirely a predictable affair, that a lot of the chaos and confusion and problems that flowed out of that decision came? I mean, you personally, I mean, when you think about it now in retrospect, was it not a bad decision to put this in downtown Toronto in the financial district?
Well, perhaps I can have Mr. Elcock answer as to why those were the recommendations that were made with the government and why the government, in fact, agreed with Mr. Elcock's assessment of the situation. So perhaps Mr.
Okay, I'll come
Elcock
back to Mr. Elcock in the second hour on that question. Let me go to the issue of cost. Now, Minister, you've said in the House, and I quote, "We wait for bills to come in before we determine costs." It's now been 4 months. 4 months since we know the details of all of this spending. Now, we know about $200 million. We had to pry it out with an order paper question. We know about glow sticks and in-suite snacks and millions and millions of dollars on a wide array of things that seem dubious, including lake creation and lake elimination. But what we don't have now, even 4 months later, are those bills. And I'm sorry, I don't accept this rationale that you're giving me unless you're telling me that you hand out blank checks. How could you not know what the bills are? I mean, if you're telling me that you wait for contractors to come and tell you what reasonable costs are 4 months after the fact, I mean, how long do you wait, Minister, before you get the details on how much this thing costs? And why is it now 4 months and we still don't have about $1 billion in specific details?
Well, Mr. Holland, you may come from a background where you pay bills before they are presented to you, before the facts are. This government does not. This government waits until we actually receive the bills before we actually pay the bills and announce what the costs are. We understand what the general budget is of the security. I've made those figures available, but we don't pay bills until the contractor has demonstrated, in fact, that he has in fact provided the services and the details justifying the bill.
Yeah, but
and
Minister,
so, no, let me finish, Mr. Holland. You've gone on.
I don't think you're missing my point, and I only have about a minute left.
So what we have said is that all contractors will submit their bills by December 1st of this year. And at that point, all of those bills will be examined to ensure that the services claimed for have in fact been provided, and that in fact will be done. This will then be audited, and it will also be audited by the Auditor General. Now, if you submit that what we should do is just pay what we think
No,
the
let me be clear, because you're putting words in my mouth. Let me, through the chair, if I could, let me pose a question. Let me put it to you this way, Minister, because you're misunderstanding.
Mr. Holland, I'll give you time to come back on this.
Okay, because you're misunderstanding.
You have indicated that we should be paying the bills before they arrive.
That's not.
I disagree.
No, let me be clear. Let me be clear, and maybe this will help. If I hire somebody to do a job, they tell me how much that job is going to be. Before I enter into a contract, I know its cost. Right. What you don't do is go and say, go do the work and tell me, come back with whatever the reasonable costs are, and we'll fill in the blank check later on. And so what I'm saying to you is that surely when you engaged all these different contracts, you knew what the cost was supposed to be, and you entered into some assurance that the cost would be lower to a certain value with a contingency. Now, you can pay those later if you like, but why on earth could you not submit today, or for that matter 4 months ago when the excuse of security disappeared, what the estimate of those costs were? Surely you built into some kind of contingency. Surely you got some kind of assurance of what those costs would be and can provide those. The notion that you just don't know because you got to wait for those bills to come in to find out what the dollar figure is. I mean, to be frank, if that's how you do business, no wonder you have the biggest deficit in Canadian history.
All right. Well, let me do this. So then, what you're proposing, let's use your example of a contract. The contractors come to you and said, I'm going to do a driveway for you in a house that you're building, and that bill will be $30,000. Let's assume, more or less. What you are saying is just pay the $30,000 beforehand before you even see the driveway, whether it's done or not. That's not the way we do business. The service has to be provided before we can confirm whether or not we're actually going to pay the money. So you and I see our business responsibilities differently. I would not consent to the payment prior to the officials being satisfied that the service has actually been provided. You would.
But you'd certainly know what the contract cost was.
Madame Morani, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to address another issue, not so much costs, but human rights. I will give you a bit of an overview. As you know, there were over 1,000 individuals arrested at the G20 summit. The estimate is 800 would have been released with no charges. The majority who received charges, therefore, were absolved of their charges, no longer have any. As of October 14, 2010, in a report issued by an association, Ligue et Droits des Libertés, apparently 6 people would have been convicted. A few dozen people are still waiting their trial. I have personally met with some people, and some people sent in a statement by mail to me or by email. Apparently, police would have had heinous, sexist, homophobic comments to make about these individuals, treating protesters as terrorists, criminals, French shit. Other allegations were leveled. You fucking disgusting, apparently relating to homosexuals, Minister. Also, journalists were also incarcerated. Some were beaten. Some strip searching also would have taken place. Intimidation, humiliation, hunger, fear, cold. People would have been treated apparently like rats. Women had their pills taken away from them. People who needed diabetes medication also. Men were vaccinated without their consent, without knowing what was being injected into them. I hear also of maxi pads, etc. Women no longer had the pill, so they were all getting their period. Rationing of tampons and the rest. People were sleeping outside in the cold, in cages, 15 to 30 people. People would have had to wait over almost 24 hours to have access to counsel, to have the use of a phone. People traumatized, young people, the age of 20, 25. I was also told about a minor who would have ended up in one of these cages of yours. Also, strip searching, sometimes 4 strip searches of the same individual. Also, strip searching of individuals in front of an open door, men able to see this, chemical toilets in these cells where people were going to the washroom in front of everyone else. Sexist comments towards women were uttered. I think it's absolutely unacceptable. In closing, I would say Amy Miller is a journalist and a woman that I spoke to this morning, and she told me that she was biking to cover the detention center. There was going to be a protest to ask for people to be released, and she was stopped on the way there because she was filming a group of young people that were met with the police, and she had a badge, a journalist badge, and she identified herself as being part of the media, and I'll leave this to your discretion. She was asked, when we'll be done with you, you're not going to want to keep working as a journalist. We're going to have a lot of fun with you. You're not going to want to come back to Toronto. We're going to have fun with you. We know what Montreal women are like. She met with other women in the cage that she was in for a number of hours. One told her that in the strip search, a finger had been inserted into her vagina. This said, Minister, given the fact that you are the minister responsible for public safety, I would like to know whether you're going to be saying you're sorry for all of these people that experience such outrageous treatment.
One of the things that, Chair, in this committee, one of the things that we've got to be very cautious, whether it's in a quote or just being used, that we use the right kind of language. So if there's a quote where there is a vulgarity that shouldn't be used in the House, it shouldn't be used here. And I'll just remind you of that for future. Go ahead, Mr. Minister.
Very much. I certainly listened with interest to the comments. There are a number of agencies that are responsible for ensuring that the police conduct themselves appropriately. If there are any individual Canadians or indeed any foreign attendees at the G8 and G20 summits who have specific issues that they wish to complain about police conduct, I would encourage them to bring those to the appropriate authorities. However, I do not get involved in the policing issues. There are appropriate civilian and other agencies that review police conduct, and of course, most of all, there's the courts that has the oversight of this. So, what I would suggest, without accepting the validity of any of the comments that were made, but not discounting them either, I would suggest that the member advise these individuals who have made these complaints to take those complaints to the appropriate authorities where they can be dealt with in a non-political fashion and in accordance with law.
From what I understand, Minister, you do not want to apologize for the abuse of the police forces that are under your command. From what I understand, people could certainly take their complaints. Well, people are already issuing their complaints. But my question is, are you going to be calling for a public investigation so that we may know what took place in this total mess of $1 billion? And I'm not only referring to the funds that were invested into this circus, but rather human rights violations, abuses committed there. In fact, I'd like to know whether you're going to call for an investigation. Trigger 1, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission is seriously going to look into this matter and will certainly be asking you some questions you're going to have to answer.
Or Mr. Minister, if you wanted to respond, please.
Thank you. What I would certainly call for is these individuals who make these allegations, I would encourage them to bring them to the appropriate authorities. There are independent bodies as well as courts who make these types of determinations, and I would suggest that that's the appropriate venue for those types of accusations to be dealt with in an appropriate manner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We'll move to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, you have 7 minutes.
Mr. Minister, last week on October 20th, during question period, I and my colleague from the bloc both asked you questions in the House of Commons about the allegations of CSIS Director Richard Fadden, that there were politicians in the country who were under the influence of foreign governments. You responded to these questions as follows. Mr. Speaker, I will be at the committee on Monday.
Point of order there, Mr. Davies.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be there on Monday. The member can ask me any question that she likes.
Mr. Davies, I again remind you today that we aren't here on the estimates. We aren't here on specific to CSIS. We aren't here on Mr. Fadden. We are here on the G8, G20. And so what we expect is that we have relevance, the question being asked to the issue in which we have invited the Minister and his colleagues at the desk.
Mr. Chairman.
And if you don't have a question on that, we'll move to the next.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, don't worry. I have lots of questions on G20. The minister himself said that he would be here where the member can ask any question that we like. So it's up to the minister. I mean,
Okay, on a point of order, Mr. Rathgate.
Nothing here.
Well,
Maybe the minister can
the agenda is quite clear. We're here to conduct a study of G20 issues surrounding security. Mr. Davies is going off on questions that can be handled in other matters if he's unsatisfied with the answers that he's received. This is not the forum, and I'm asking, Mr. Chair, that we stick to the agenda.
Yeah, I'm just not going to. I'm not going to take that as a point of order. I think I've made a decision on this one that we just continue with the question specific to the G. If you are asking about CSIS's responsibility, if any, in the G8 G20, I'll accept the question. But if not, we'll move to proceed to the next. Well, I didn't take it as a point of order. I just. Okay, Mr. Holland, quickly.
Very quickly, the solution is very simple. Minister, come before this committee. There's absolutely no reason.
We're now on debate.
Do it,
Mr.
Minister.
Davies,
You owe it to this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I just hope my time isn't counted for all those interjections. Then,
yes, it does.
Oh, well. A little fairness, Mr. Chairman, would be nice.
Point of order.
On my ruling, the time is counting. On Mr. Rathgaber's and Mr. Holland's, no. So continue.
Monsieur le Président, point d'ordre.
Point of order.
Président,
Mr. Chairman, October 20th, 2010, the Minister of Public Safety said, and it is written here in the verbatim, he says that he will appear to respond to all of our questions because he was unwilling to appear in this room to discuss these issues with us. You're telling us now?
ça dit une fausseté alors.
So the Minister didn't tell us.
If you recall, in our last meeting, we've made an ability to deal with that at a later time. And so I think we'll just proceed with Mr. Davies.
Une fausseté, c'est beau. On comprend.
I'll proceed
Truth.
with the minister on a different day. Mr. Minister, I read this statement. There's not one word in this statement about the mass arrests or the widespread violations of civil liberties or the illegal searches, the unlawful arrests, and this is the largest mass arrest in Canadian history. And I'm a little surprised and disappointed with that. And I'm going to ask you pointedly and directly, who was responsible for the decision to arrest some 900 innocent Canadians?
Well, I don't know anything about the guilt or innocence of people. That's not my task to make that determination. And I know that it's typical of the NDP to ask political people to get involved in police operations. I don't do that. And it would be inappropriate for me to do that. You know that. And to politicize what is essentially a police operation is entirely inappropriate. You can ask all the various police departments who have the lawful authority to make those decisions. But as a politician, even as a minister, I do not have that authority, and it would be highly inappropriate for me to, in fact, intervene in a political way in the independence of any policing agency.
Okay, Mr.
As
Minister.
I've indicated,
Mr. Minister, excuse me, I have limited time here. You're not going to filibuster the question
no, I'm
after
not
all we've already
filibustering.
ducking
Let me
on
just
Mr.
finish.
Fadden.
Let me just finish.
We'll
There
get to the point,
are
Mr. Minister.
agencies.
It was a simple question.
There are. Well, then let
Who
me
was
give you a
responsible?
simple answer. There are agencies who make the determination as to whether or not there was any inappropriate conduct by any of the police officers involved.
Okay, I've heard
and
that, Mr. Minister.
And
Mr.
that's
Minister,
the appropriate.
You started off by saying you didn't know about the guilt or innocence.
That's
there
right.
There were 1,105 people arrested. 900 were ultimately cleared without charge. That means that they were not even arrested. They are innocent, Mr. Minister. The people that arrested them ended up dropping the charges when they went back to court.
I don't follow that. You said they weren't arrested.
900 people were arrested, 900 people were charged, and those charges were dropped. That's 900 of 1,100. That's almost 90% of Canadians that were arrested when coming at first appearance, the state had so little evidence, they actually didn't proceed with the charges. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, let me put it this way. I hope that you put this question to the responsible police agencies and the Crown attorneys who make that decision. As you know, those are provincial Crown attorneys under the jurisdiction of the provincial Ontario Attorney General. And I assume that you're putting those questions to that individual.
It's the province's fault and the police department.
I'm just indicating that I do not exercise authority in areas where I have no authority. And you would be the first to be critical if I did.
Mr. Minister, there were 20,000 security personnel within a 20-block radius in Toronto. There was a small group of agitators who ran amok, breaking store windows, torching police cars for 30 minutes without any interruption by a police officer. I imagine you've checked into that. What can you tell us about how and why that occurred?
Well, I can leave it to either the RCMP officer here or the security advisors to do that. I do not get involved in the determination of the guilt or innocence of individuals on our streets who are demonstrating lawfully or otherwise.
Mr. Minister, hang on. I wasn't asking anything about guilt or innocence. I was asking about the conduct of police. You're responsible for the RCMP, are you not, sir?
I do not involve...
You are not responsible for the RCMP
well,
or not?
Let me answer that. I am not responsible for the operational decisions of the RCMP or any other police department. Let me finish. I am not responsible for the operational decisions of any police force. They respond to either police agencies, independent civilian agencies, or the courts. I will not...
Who do the RCMP report to, sir? Do they not report to you?
The commissioner reports to me, but he does not report on operational matters. And what you're asking me to do is essentially unlearning the lesson that we learned at the Hughes inquiry. Do you recall the Hughes inquiry in the APEC? Of course I do. And when the Liberals involved themselves in RCMP operations at a demonstration? That is highly inappropriate, Mr. Davies, and you know it.
I'm asking if it's concerning to you that people rioted in the middle of Toronto.
Mr. Davies, your time is up. Your time is up. All right. In fact, you have more time than what we'll proceed to the government side. Mr. McKenzie.
Thanks to the panel that are here today. One of the difficulties is there's a number of people that like to talk rather than listen. And Minister, I think that in your opening address you indicated that there are reasons why the final costs aren't known. And I read from your opening address, it says once the security partners submit their final financial claim for reimbursement, an independent audit will be conducted to ensure that only eligible costs are reimbursed. That would seem logical to most Canadians, but obviously my friend across the table thinks that you should either guess at that or simply send a blank check and let them fill it in. That is the case. We're still waiting for some of those security partners?
That's correct. The security partners deliver their bills to us. The last date, as I understand it, is December 1st of this year. The auditing process will occur then to ensure that the services claimed for have in fact been delivered. Those will not only be audited by government officials, but indeed the Auditor General. And I welcome the Auditor General's review of our process in this particular case.
And who might some of those security partners be that we would anticipate may very well submit invoices, if you will, to the government?
It can be anything from the Ontario Provincial Police, the Toronto City Police, the regional police force, the Peel Regional, I believe it is. So all of these individual organizations will calculate all of their expenses, put forward the necessary documents to prove that claim, and then forward it to the responsible individuals in public safety.
And my understanding was that there were about 20,000 security people involved, so it will be fairly broad in those organizations assembling their numbers. Is that a reasonable expectation?
I think you've hit the point right on the head. It's indeed not simply one contract that we're dealing with here, one simple provision of services. Even within one organization, though that organization could provide various types of services, not only the police services that were involved, but also private contractors who did work on behalf of the summit. I'm wondering, Mr. Alcock, is there any other additional comments you can make in that respect?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think at this stage the numbers are still, there are some numbers that have come in, but the reality is we do not have final numbers and will not really have final numbers in particular until the costs from Ontario, Toronto, Peel Regional are finally in and audited.
Certainly over the last few months, we've heard wild and well, I would say wild and crazy numbers come out of the official opposition, particularly on some of these things. And one of the things I believe we've heard them talk about is, and perhaps the RCMP officer can tell us about what they deem the draining of a quarry for multi-million dollars. My understanding is it might not quite be as they have indicated this facility. It was, in fact, in the Barrie area, or Orillia area, I'm sorry.
Yes, the quarry you're referring to is where we built what we called a temporary accommodation facility for the police officers that stayed in the Huntsville area to police the G8. The Huntsville area did not have adequate accommodation available. It required building of a facility, and basically it was a very, very large trailer park that would house 4,500 police officers. The quarry itself was one of the only areas. We searched the whole area looking for a suitable spot. We found 2 locations that were potentially good for that size of an operation. There may be a bit of a misconception. I've heard it reported that we drained the lake or that there was water already there, but that's not the case. When we started preparing the site, and the studies had been done on the site previously, but when we started to prepare the site, in digging to prepare the ground for the trailers, there was an underground spring that came up through the digging, and we had to drain that spring toward a lake that was there. So we put in culverts, and the cost you're referring to, sir, is the cost of putting in the culverts and redirecting the water from the underground spring to a lake that already existed in the quarry.
Would you have an idea of what that cost was? I believe we've heard from the opposition it was in the millions. I believe I saw something somewhere indicating something like $134,000.
Yeah, it was in the hundreds. It's $144,000.
$144,000. A long ways from $2 million.
Yes.
The other thing that when we talk about cost, Minister, I think we've heard inflation and almost trying to make it frivolous about glow sticks. In fact, glow sticks have an important need or use by the police in communities such as where these were hosted, and perhaps the RCMP officer can tell us a little bit about what the real need for the glow sticks is.
Yes, if I may. And I was remiss in not thanking the committee on my first response for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I do appreciate the opportunity to clear up some of these questions. The glow sticks weren't used actually by the police. They were used by the Canadian Forces. And they do have a specific operational purpose. I checked with my colleagues at the Canadian Forces before I came in to ask if it was appropriate to speak of it. And it's a very simple answer. The glow stick is used. They have about an 8-hour shelf life. So you have to replace them 3 times a day, and they use them for marking equipment at night. And dangerous areas that we're traveling through, or if you're doing foot patrols at night and there's a hole or something that you have to be conscious of, that it's really for safety of the Canadian Forces members. And that's what they were for. They were for marking equipment, generators, any kind of outfits that we had set up in a wooded area, because as you know, the Canadian Forces, the majority of their work was done in heavily wooded areas in the Huntsville area. The RCMP ourselves only purchased $350 worth of glow sticks, and that's for an operational requirement that I really can't discuss.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, and we will now come back on the second round. I remind you, these are 5-minute rounds. Mr. Canyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, page 21 and 22 of your opening remarks today, you indicate once these claims are received, the final audits will commence with the intent to have the process completed by March 31, 2011. And then you indicate you will respond to all questions posed on the security budget and costs and will deliver a final financial report on actual costs incurred once available. Taking you at your word that you want to provide full disclosure to the committee, I'm asking you now for your commitment to come back once all this information is available for a full 2-hour session before the committee to justify these.
Well, what I said, in fact, and the sentence is right in front of you. You didn't quote exactly what it said. So what I said was, I can assure this committee that this government will respond to all questions. And if it's necessary for the minister to be there in order to deal with those types of details, then the committee will make that determination. I won't make any commitment at this point.
Okay, thank you. Now, Minister, I understand you have a lot of persons that you rely upon for advice, but you will agree with me that decisions in terms of what's going to be spent, taxpayers' money, such as where summits are going to be held, those are political decisions that at the end of the day are made by members of Parliament and more specifically by the government and by the minister. This is not for the advisors to make these decisions, it's for the government to make these decisions, correct?
The government relies on experts to make determinations. Ultimately, determinations are made on the recommendations of these individuals.
Of course, and I agree that you have to take into account the recommendations of persons and experts, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. It's the government's decision. They're not elected. They don't control taxpayers' money. You do. So it's your decision, correct?
Ultimately, the government is responsible for the expenditures of the decisions based on the decisions that were made.
Right, thank you. So I would like to know why the government decided, based on all of the recommendations they received, why the government, what the thought process was, and why they decided to split the G8 and G20 summits between Huntsville and Toronto rather than holding it in one location.
In this case, I can advise you that we followed exactly the advice of the experts that we retained, and Mr. Alcock can provide you with exactly the reasons why we did that.
Okay, so are you telling me that you essentially were told what to do by the experts? I'm asking you why you decided to agree with their decision. On what thought process did you decide this was right or wrong, and why did you agree and make this decision?
Because Mr. Alcock made a convincing argument that these recommendations should be followed, and that's the basis we made the final decision.
So based on your memory, what's the convincing argument that you, as the responsible minister and the government, decided to accept to come to this decision? Why did you make this decision?
I don't have those notes before me, but what I can assure you is that the recommendations that were made by Mr. Alcock and others were exactly the reasons that we followed in making the determination. And I can have Mr. Alcock repeat for your edification the reasons why that were given.
We can do that later. Thank you, Minister. As we sit here today, what you're telling me then is you cannot recall what the recommendations were that led you to make the decision to split the summits between Huntsville and Toronto. Is that accurate?
Well, I can tell you that I was the minister in January of this year.
Fine. On behalf of the government, since you represent the government, can you tell us, do you remember what the reason is that the government decided to follow whatever the recommendations were to split the summits between Huntsville and Toronto?
Yes, I can advise you that we followed Mr. Alcock's advice, and he can provide you with those answers. I don't have those here before me today.
Okay, that's fine. So as we sit here today, you actually personally cannot answer the question as to why the government made the decision to split the summits between Huntsville and Toronto.
I can advise you that it appeared to be the most reasonable and compelling arguments that we heard.
Why do you say that? And what's the specific recommendation or recommendations that you can tell us the government received, as you can recall today, that lead you to that conclusion that that was the most reasonable course of action?
Well,
yeah, just on that point, Mr. Alcock is here. Minister Taves has already suggested that we could hear from Mr. Alcock if you're willing to listen to the special advisor to that to answer that question.
Could I have some more time now, please?
Do you want Mr. Alcock to answer?
No, I'm asking the minister.
Continue.
Thank you.
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Alcock in terms of providing those reasons. I believe he has them, and he's prepared to provide those for you.
I understand that, Minister, and I think
all I can say is this: I don't recall disagreeing with Mr. Alcock in respect of any of the recommendations he made in respect of location, insofar as I was involved in any of those decisions.
Okay. There's a second one. We have the splitting of the summits. We also have the CNE, because I understand, Minister, that there was a recommendation that the summit be held for the Toronto portion at the CNE as opposed to downtown Toronto, and it would have been less expensive and it would have had less impact upon the City of Toronto. So I would also like to know, and I'm going to ask you one question more, I'd also like to know why that did not happen, and I'm going to ask you to provide copies of all documentation that you say you as a government relied upon to make all of these decisions, because you keep relying upon the experts. We should be able to read what the experts said.
Thank you, Mr.
All I can say is that I do not recall Mr. Alcock making that recommendation, that alternative locations were discussed, and no recommendation was made in respect of proceeding in those alternative locations. The locations that were recommended were, in fact, the ones that the government ultimately accepted. There were various arguments, and I do recall this, made about various locations, and the experts advised us for a number of reasons, and in quite a lengthy briefing, about why this would be the most appropriate location. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Back to Mr. McKenzie. We're a minute over already, minute 10. Just one moment. A point of order. I hope it's a point of order, Mr. Canyon.
The minister didn't answer the second part. I asked about the production of all relevant documentation.
Well, we're a minute and a half over, and that's perhaps why he didn't answer the question. Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll get those.
I listened to my friend trying to find out why somebody would do something. I would question. I have a press release from the Liberal Party of Canada calling for answers. After receiving information, the Harper government spent $27.5 million of taxpayer money on a temporary police command center for last summer's 72-hour G8, G20 summits. And this was talking about the summit for the Bracebridge. I guess I would, in another place, I'd like to have the person that did this come and tell us where they come up with those numbers. Chief Superintendent, I think that I did read something that you had clarified some of those costs associated with the command center. In fact, this is nowhere near what the actual cost.
The total cost for the command, it's more than a command center. It's the planning operations area for the G8, G20. The command center was built within what we call the Unified Command Center, was built within that building. It's 55,000 square foot building. It was the only building in the area that we could obtain at the time that had a large enough footprint to house the planning team that we knew we were going to have to put together for the G8 and then again the G20. We also had our Joint Intelligence Group in that building, so one of the reasons, and the cost was 16.5 roughly, not 27 or whatever was quoted, but one of the reasons it is as costly as it is because of the security requirements for all of our partner agencies. As you can imagine, we have the highest level of security groups in the country in that building. No one's going to come and work there unless the building is at a top secret level, and there's a requirement in the construction of that site to put more into it than would normally be put into an ordinary building. And it is costly, but that is a part of doing business. We needed everyone together. We needed all of our security partners, and without that site, we wouldn't have had them, and we wouldn't have been able to secure the sites in the manner we did.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Alcock, maybe you can help me a little bit here. My friends across are experts in security, and my understanding was there were large numbers of international people, large numbers of Canadians, somewhere in excess of 3,000 press people that were at the summit in Toronto. Are there hotel rooms at the C&E grounds?
No, there aren't, Mr. Chairman.
And would it mean then to move these large numbers of people, there would be huge costs in providing security?
If the event had been held at the C&E grounds, we would have had to secure both the C&E grounds and also the hotel area in downtown Toronto, since that would have been the only place that people could have stayed, and they were relatively large delegations. And likely enough, it would have looked, in terms of trying to control a specific area, number of hotels, it would have looked pretty much the same, whether or not the meeting was held in the MTCC or in the C&E grounds. But we would have had, if it had been held in the C&E grounds, the added cost of securing, the added cost, both human and monetary, of securing the the C&E grounds, as well as securing the various routes to and from the C&E grounds. And that would have been a much more complicated security operation.
Also a fair assessment to do what you did do, or what was done in a very successful way with all of the partners, took a great deal of cooperation from police agencies, not only in Toronto, but in a broader perspective from perhaps even across the country. To do the additional would have been a real drag on resources of police agencies?
I think particularly in a year where we had already had the Olympics, which was a huge draw on police forces from across the country, because no police force in Canada is really big enough on its own within a specific city to manage an event the size of the G8 and the G8 and the G20. The reality was the police forces were seeking assistance from other police forces across the country, the RCMP in particular drawing from its other divisions in order to have sufficient numbers of people in Toronto. And that was difficult for many of the other police forces, given that there had already been a fairly large loan of people for the Olympics in February.
Mr. McKenzie, sorry, our time is just out. Monsieur Gaudette or Madame Morani, vous avez...
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais partager mon temps.
Thank you. I'll be splitting my time with my colleague. Minister, you were saying earlier on that it would seem that you're not quite responsible for what happened. You say you're unaware. You're always referring to Mr. Elcock. I think perhaps we should appoint him Minister. Public Safety seems to be more aware of things than you are. Perhaps you might recall, Minister, whether your department or even yourself, in cooperation perhaps with Mr. Elcock, who knows, would have sent clear guidelines on safety and treatment for protester. What would these have been?
The operational issues are handled by the RCMP and the various police forces, not the Minister of Public Safety. I would not have sent any
Donc,
directives.
vous avez aucune implication là-dedans.
I would not have sent any directives of that nature.
Ok, très bien. Donc,
Very well. I'll resume or repeat my question and give you a bit of a picture of the situation, because when we're talking about protester, we often get the idea of this impersonal mass. Some of these people are here. Some people will come and appear before the committee. Jacinthe Poisson, Maryse Poisson, Kevin Gagnon, Wissam Mansour, Will Prosper, Narjas Mustafa, Marie-Ève Desrosiers, Émilie Guimond-Bélanger, Julien Parent, Bruno, Laetitia, Sylvia Bissonnette, Lynn Dubord, Patrick Sicotte, Mathieu Boucher, Franche Kirouette, Dominique Paladis. These are names of young people who just can't get over this image of Canada. They would never have imagined they would have ever have been treated like rats in Toronto. Even though you are responsible for nothing, perhaps maybe you could issue an apology and say, these are not rats, these are human beings. They really had a vision for democracy, and really you broke that. This is a very powerful institution you represent. You realize, Minister, the image of Canada given to these young people in Toronto, the image conveyed, and the image conveyed to these young people who no longer believe in protesting. They no longer believe in Canadian democracy. What do you have to say to these young people?
Well, Madam MP, all I can suggest is that Canada is one of the most open countries in respect of the right to protest, the right to demonstrate. In fact, I've been subject to a demonstration or protest from time to time myself. I've always been pleased that people would take the time to recognize me in that way, even if I don't agree with them. But individuals are free in this country to protest according to law. And as I've indicated, if there's any improprieties that have
Il y a eu
there's any
900 personnes qui ont été incarcérées parce qu'ils sont allés...
900 people were charged.
Non, je vous ai très bien écouté.
I mean,
Je dis qu'il y a 900...
No, I did hear you. 900 people protested.
Anytime. If you want me to speak, I'll speak. If you don't, interrupt.
Je n'ai pas beaucoup de temps.
I don't have much time, Minister. I asked you a question you have yet to answer. Will you apologize? Just say yes or no.
Opportunity to answer, and it's obvious that you're not interested in any answers here. Just judging from the questions, it's clear that you don't understand the basic rule that politicians do not get involved in security operations, and the police make those determinations. Police on the street make those determinations.
And
I mean,
I'm not talking about operations, Minister.
You don't understand the fundamental distinction between the responsibility of elected individuals and police in operational situations. And if you want to have that discussion, we can have that discussion. What I can do for you is suggest that you read the Hughes report. If you want to read the Hughes report, it'll give you a very clear indication of what not to do as a politician in terms of directing police. And the prior Liberal government.
Will you be calling for a public investigation? In fact, that is your role to ask for public investigation, public inquiry. No, you won't. Again.
Unfortunately, Mr. Minister, I want to thank you for coming today. You have given us the hour that we've asked for and a little longer, and we appreciate your attendance here. As you know, this committee will be taken with this study for a number of more meetings where we will hear from various witnesses, and we thank you for being here initially to kickstart this study. So if
Mr. Chair, if I might just say, as always, it's a pleasure appearing in front of this committee and having an opportunity to exchange views and comments with all of the members. And I want to thank each and every one of them for the hard work that they do on behalf of the people of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We're going to continue with the meeting as we go here, and so I'm going to continue as the minister takes exit, and we will go back to Mr. Norlock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question would be to Chief Superintendent McNeil. Questions. I guess the first question, having some background in policing, about 30 years, although not in the same capacity as yourself, Chief, would I be correct in saying the majority of costs in the RCMP or in the security arrangements were labor-related?
Yes, that would be correct.
Would it also be correct to say there's a significant proportion of that that would be attributable to overtime?
There would be a portion of that, that's correct.
Yes, and I would gather, because you're still awaiting invoicing from the province of Ontario, the City of Toronto, and other police agencies, that at this point you wouldn't have the exact numbers of hours used in overtime, police overtime?
I don't have the exact numbers in overtime, no.
Okay, but, you know, it would be reasonable that it would be a significant double-digit percentage.
I can't comment exactly on that.
That's fair. That's fair. It would also be reasonable to say that some of those operational costs, if they have to do with labor, would be recouped by the government through income tax payments. You don't have to comment. I can tell you that I think it's all reasonable that if you receive a paycheck and that occurs. The other significant portion is the police have also a responsibility not only to protect the lives, safety, and property of citizens, but they also have a duty to protect the lives, safety, and property of people who are acting as either lawful demonstrators or, quite frankly, even hooligans, and the people that you arrest, you're responsible for their safety.
Yes, I think, if I may, I'd just like to go back to the fact that if you look at the week leading up to the G8 and the G20, there was protest activity all that week, and sometimes that's not remembered, but we had spent a lot of time, I'm talking about the Integrated Security Unit, in advance of the summits, meeting with protest groups to talk about where they were going to protest, when they were going to come, in order to make sure that we have enough police officers on the street to handle the traffic and the crowd control issues that would come from that. If you remember, and if you were watching television that week, we had protest activity all the way to Friday. We had no problems. We had no arrests. But you would have seen police officers walking along with the protest groups all week long on bicycles or walking with them to ensure that the intersections was blocked so the groups could go through. It wasn't an adversarial setup between the police and the protesters at all. And we spent a lot of time in preparation for that. It wasn't until the weekend that there were arrests. So yes, it is absolutely true that it's necessary for the police to protect those people and those rights, and we value those rights. And that's something that is lost in some of this.
Any more time, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, you have another minute and a half.
Thank you very much. So let me get this straight, because I always ask my questions in a way so that the person sitting at home can understand what's occurring here at committee, and I try not to get into the politics as some people want to politicize this. What you're saying is that for those people who were protesting the week before, in other words, surrounding the G20, the week or so before, et cetera, for those people who wanted to lawfully protest, there were meetings between the police and them, and that those protests went off fairly well without any significant incidents, and that the police and the protesters were cooperating.
That's correct. We had what we referred to as community relations groups that met with anyone who was planning a protest that would come and meet with us, of course, and we tried to facilitate that to the best of our ability.
So, without commenting necessarily upon motivation, but from those that you didn't get that kind of cooperation, does the information that you have at this time, that information that you have as a result of people who didn't want to meet with you, didn't want to discuss what their intentions were, would I be correct in saying that from those groups and your anecdotal observations, that from those groups tended to be the people who you had the most reason to come into negative contact, in other words, arrests or detentions?
I can't really comment on that. I don't know exactly who represented what groups.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNeil. We'll now go to Ms. Mendez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions for Mr. Alcock. I think we can all agree that, the minister was quite clear on his lack of competency in telling us exactly why and how this decision was made. The decision on the site as to where the summit should be held. When the time came to separate the summit in two, in other words, the Huntsville summit and the Toronto summit, who justified the idea of setting this right in the middle of the financial district in Toronto, right downtown Toronto? Who thought that this would be an easy place to secure, given how busy the area is and the type of activity there?
Mr. Chairman, the choice of sites for any summit is a complicated issue, and there were a number of organizations that had an interest or a role in that process. It wasn't a security decision as to whether or not a site was or was not the appropriate venue. Once it was clear that Huntsville was going to be too small to host the G20, it just simply doesn't have the infrastructure to do so. It was clear that the only alternative would be to move the G20 to Toronto, which had the capacity to host, had the required infrastructure.
Why would you choose Huntsville to begin with? Is it because it was Minister Clement's writing?
Mr. Chairman, Huntsville was chosen originally as the site of the G8. And as a site for the G8, which have normally been held in rural areas, it was actually a pretty good site and indeed did do a very good job of hosting the G8. It had the right size venue for a G8. It was the more rural area. It was relatively easy to secure. And that was the reason why Huntsville was originally chosen.
D'accord, mais une fois que vous avez su...
All right, but once you knew that the G20 was also being planned, why have it in two separate spots? We know that Canada has a number of tourist attractions that are quite interesting to support this type of event. Why not think of another place? For instance, Montebello around here, Mont-Tremblant in Quebec, Banff. There are a number of places in Canada where this type of event could have been held. It would be far easier to secure as well.
There actually are very few places when you actually look at the numbers involved where the G20 could have been held, and the reality is that it needed to be held somewhere where there was enough infrastructure to manage a G20, and unfortunately most of those venues would be too small for a G20.
Et comment le reste du monde organise?
How does the rest of the world organize these events with at far lower costs, fewer transformations like the fake lake, etc.?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the so-called fake lake, and that's not the appropriate description, was not a part of the security budget in any case. In terms of the numbers that one can find for G8s or G20s that have been held in other countries, I have yet to see a complete budget for any other G8 or G20 that's been held anywhere else in the world. The reality is, in terms of countries reporting the full costs, we are probably the most transparent jurisdiction in the world.
A country like Britain has this audited publicly by their auditor. I mean, they can't hide.
It's not a case of other countries hiding costs, Mr. Chairman. It is a case of, in many cases, costs are accounted for in very different ways.
Okay, so why say that we're just the most transparent? We may account it differently, but it's not necessarily because we're more transparent.
But we do account it. What that accounting does ultimately mean, for example, in the case of the UK, they use the police force in London. If they were to host, and as they did, host the G20 in London, they have a large number of police within the London area and would not therefore need to call for additional forces from across the country, as we would have to do in any G8 or G20. So the reality is, by definition, their accounts will show the police drawn from within the London area, but there are no accounts there for the accommodation of the police or all the care and feeding of the police, because they simply go home for tea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hancock. And we'll move back to Mr. McColman.
Thank you for being here as well, and for getting into some of the details now that the minister is gone. You know, as we watched the G8 and G20 unfold, I think the one thing that Canadians did realize is that free speech is a principle of our democracy. And I think when the violent mob that was made up of the thugs, hooligans, and anarchists who set fire to the police cars and damaged property during the G20 in no way, shape, or form represents the democracy or our way of life. And I'm interested in delving into, under some extremely difficult situations, how the police were tasked and how they conducted themselves. And just to quote Toronto Chief Bill Blair, and he was quoted as saying that they were there to facilitate peaceful protests, the police. And he even went as far as saying the police responsibility in a democracy is the rights to protect peaceful protests. So my question really is for Chief Superintendent McNeil. During an interview last week on TV Ontario, Toronto Chief Bill Blair, Chief of Police Bill Blair, said that there was excellent communication amongst the security partners and a very clear command structure. First of all, do you agree with Chief Blair's assessment? And secondly, just to give Canadians an idea of the kind of pre-planning, the amount of planning that goes into one, because I'd like to know a little more in depth about how far in advance security arrangements were being worked on, how much effort went into that, and obviously there are associated costs with that. Could you comment on that?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the Chief, first of all, that there was excellent cooperation between all of the security forces involved in the operation. Just as an example, I took my role as far as the length of time of planning. I took my role to start planning the G8 in August of 2008, so 2 years in advance of the G8 and G20. We started our team in the Barrie area, and the reason we started in Barrie was we had set up in Huntsville originally, looked for a place. We couldn't find a place large enough to set up a command center and everything for the G8, so we moved back to the first location we could find that had facilities, places for the people to stay, and it was Barrie. So we built our command center in Barrie. Now, I probably should explain the structure of the command so that it's very clear to everyone on how, because I hear the question asked who was in charge. The command structure is such that if we start at the ground level first, every site, whether it be a hotel or a conference center where the leaders were staying, was called a site. And in that site, there was a person in charge of that site. So that we have a site command to start with, and that's the lowest level of command. It's the ground level. It's where people, we hope, will take most of the decisions, deal with the issues at that level. The next level of command above that is called area command, and we had an area command in Huntsville, we had an area command in Toronto. And that area command oversees all the sites in Toronto for all of Toronto and in Huntsville for all of Huntsville. If a site commander had an issue that he was uncomfortable with, or he would raise that to the area command level and they would help him in that decision. He also briefs up constantly to the area command. Now, on the top of that, there's the strategic command that was based in Barrie, and that's what we called the Unified Command Center that we've referred to earlier. That Unified Command Center had representatives from all of the police agencies that were involved on the ground. So they were monitoring all of the activity. They were also, the UCC was also responsible for the movement of the internationally protected persons, the air support that you saw, and things of that nature. But the UCC's control over the ground or the site would not be hands-on. It would be more of a strategic level. If they needed assistance, if a site commander called to the area command, for example, and said, I don't have enough police officers at the Royal York Hotel, and they find out there's not enough in all of Toronto to support that, they would call us at the UCC, and the UCC commander would say, I'll move some people from Huntsville. So it had that oversight, strategic ability to move people. So that's the command layer. So when you talk about a particular arrest on the street of Toronto, it wouldn't be someone in Barrie making that decision. It wouldn't even be someone at the area command level making that decision. It would be someone on the street in Toronto making that decision. So those decisions, as I said earlier, the best method for policing is to have the decision at the lowest level, and that's what would happen. It would be impossible for someone in Barrie to make a decision on a particular arrest. So if that explains the command structure for you, that's something that I think I wanted to explain to clear up any misconceptions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McColeman. We will move to Mr. Holland, and then to Madame Morani and Monsieur Gaudet.
Well, in the minister's words, he said he didn't have the competence to answer many of the questions that I posed to him. So I'm going to now turn back to some of the questions I was going at before. Let's take a look at, just announced today in Korea, who's hosting the G20. They announced what their security price tag is going to be. They peg it at 24.9 million Canadian dollars. Now, that's not a little off our figure. That's a world off our figure. If you look at Kananaskis in Canada, if you want to take a domestic example, now admittedly that was the G8, we're talking about a security tab that was around $200 million, which was significantly cheaper again. I just trying to understand, because what I heard in the statement earlier was that the G20, there was nowhere but downtown Toronto. Nowhere else could host it. This was the only option. It was the best option, the most secure option, the cheapest option. Frankly, what I'm hearing is that you do it all over again. I mean, that's what really worries me about all of this. And so let me pose it to Madame Morin and to Mr. Alcock. Looking at the rest of the world and best practices out there, is downtown Toronto the best place to put the G20, and would you do it again?
First of all, let me thank the committee for inviting me to appear this afternoon. Mr. Holland, I wanted to compliment Mr. Alcock's earlier answer by saying that G20s, by definition, have all been held in urban environments because of the number of participants and because of the infrastructure exigencies associated with holding such multifaceted summits as the G20. So we've had London, we have had Pittsburgh, we will have Seoul. So it is the case, in fact, that the number of cities that can actually receive such summits are by definition highly urban environments.
No, I understand. I don't mean to interject, but maybe just to be specific, because my time is limited. Look, we spent more than any other jurisdiction. I mean, this was an enormous amount of money. And so the question is simple, and maybe you can just answer it as a yes or no to both of you. Would you do it again? Do you feel mistakes were made, or do you feel that if we found out we were hosting the G20 again, lock and load, let's do it the same way?
Mr. Chairman, the choice of a summit site is not a security choice, as I said earlier. There may be security implications that would cause a specific site to be a less good site or a better site.
Well, let me jump in.
At the end of the day, the government decides.
No, but this is critical, and I only have 5 minutes. This is critical. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I have to interrupt because the question is, the minister told me that he couldn't answer about where it was placed because he said he didn't have the competence to make the decision.
No, Mr. Holland, you're putting words. That's not what he said.
Well, who gave the advice? If you said that you're not responsible for the selection of the site, the minister said it wasn't that he just relied on your advice, and you're saying that you're not responsible for selecting the site. So who's responsible for selecting the site?
Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, there are a number of groups, organizations that have a view on where a summit should be held.
But who chose it?
At the end of the day, it's a choice made by government on the basis of the advice given to them by both security, but also the Senate Management Office, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and other departments and agencies.
But on what advice? He said that it was your advice to put it there, is what he said.
It was our advice with respect to security issues was part of that framework upon which the government made the decision.
But was it specifically to do what they did? Was that your advice?
Pardon?
Was that your advice? He said that he did what you said, that you told him to put it there, he put it there. Is that the case?
At the end of the day, it was a government decision on where the summit should be put. There was a stream of advice. There was a stream of security advice. There was also advice coming from the Senate Management Office, the Department of Foreign Affairs, and others in terms of the best site because there are a number of issues which cross departmental and agency
I'll just try it one more time. He said, and just a yes or no, he said that it was your advice, and he referred to you. He said it was your decision, your advice. He just did what you said. Was that your advice, and would you do it again?
Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, the minister is the Minister of Public Safety, and the advice that he would have received from me was on the issue of security issues. I wasn't advising the minister which is the best site from a foreign affairs point of view should be chosen, or which site in terms of the specific venue that you can actually make look like a meeting site, which was the best place for it to be. That was the Senate Management Office.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, my responsibility was looking after the security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alcock. We'll now move to Madame Morandi and Mr. Gaudet.
Monsieur Gaudet a 5 minutes.
Mr. Gaudet also has 5 minutes?
You both together have 5 minutes. You both have 5 minutes.
Ok, je voudrais savoir,
Mr. Alcock, I'd like to know whether you provided advice in terms of how protesters were to be treated, how to manage them, where they should have been placed, etc. Was that part of the advice you would have provided?
Mr. Chairman, it is not my responsibility nor the Privy Council Office's responsibility, and as the Minister said earlier, not his, to give direction to the police. The police know how to manage. They know what the appropriate rules are. They have organizations which oversee them. They have organizations which review them. I don't issue directions to the police as to how they should manage demonstrators. Those are issues that the police deal with.
Monsieur McNeil.
Thank you. Mr. McNeil? The gymnasium, was that a site of interest of the gymnasium? The U of T gymnasium.
Sorry. I can't speak specifically of what occurred in Toronto on that day. I was not there. I was not present for that particular aspect of the investigation. So I think that question would be better placed with the Toronto Police Service when they come to appear before the committee.
OK, donc vous étiez pas.
All right, so you were not in charge, for instance, of the arrests that would have happened at the gym in Toronto?
No, I would be not in charge of the arrests at the gym in Toronto.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's an important point to make here that may be at issue a little. Mr. McNeil spoke, Chief Superintendent McNeil spoke earlier about the command structure. That was how the police were tied together and how they cooperated. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for members to understand that each police force within its jurisdiction retained responsibility for its jurisdiction, which is why I think Chief Superintendent McNeil is saying to you that because those events occurred within Toronto, it would be appropriate to direct those questions to the police force that actually had jurisdiction and was responsible for enforcing the law in that jurisdiction.
OK. Est-ce que vous étiez
Okay. Were you aware, Mr. McNeil, of all the allegations of abuse or violations of human rights, and what do you think?
Again, yes, I've heard of the allegations. I would have to wait. Again, there are many reviews going on right now into those allegations. There's investigations, and as been mentioned earlier by the minister, there is a reporting process for each person who feels they have a complaint to make. I really couldn't pass opinion on that.
Thank you very much. When I look at this, you're not responsible, she's not responsible, you're not responsible, the minister's not responsible. Who's responsible? Listen, because you just said it's not me, it's the other police forces. You say they're all responsible for themselves, they're all responsible. Listen, everyone's responsible? You know what that means. No one's responsible. It's like, just can't understand. If you're a minister for public safety, I mean, if he says that he's not responsible for nothing, well, then we really... Why the minister? Earlier, the minister says it was the commissioner for the RCMP who was in charge. We've got a bigger problem. We can't see him. You say you're not responsible. The lady here saying she's not responsible. This person saying he's not responsible. Who's responsible for what? Are we going to get some answer at some point? Because waiting 4 months, well, I hope that the Montreal police that, you know, we're working in Toronto, that they've come back to Montreal. I can't imagine that this is taking 4 months. If there are still police officers on the site in Toronto, that's one thing. But listen, there's a big problem. It's really poorly organized. If that's our public safety system, if we're relying on the RCMP Air India investigation in 1998, we have yet to get an answer. It's been 3 investigations. Really, that's a big problem. We should do like the Auditor General. They need to respond, be accountable to the government, not one minister. You saw what happened with the minister.
Do you want to try that? I can tell you what I'm responsible for, if that would help. I was responsible as the Integrated Security Unit Commander for putting together the security system for the G8-G20. And what that meant is that I couldn't do it myself because the jurisdiction for the G8 was OPP jurisdiction. The jurisdiction for the G20 was Toronto Police jurisdiction. Peel Regional Police has jurisdiction for the airport where all the leaders landed. The Canadian Forces has a unique capability that they bring to all of these events. In addition, because we didn't have enough police officers in those specific police services that I just mentioned, we had to bring in police officers from all over Canada. My role was to ensure that all of that was coordinated. When it comes to a specific arrest or the detention of a specific individual, I have to defer to the person that made that arrest. I cannot speak on their behalf. No police officer can speak on another police officer's behalf in that regard.
But you were responsible for something, Mr. McNeil, because you said that in 2008, you started organizing, and you're not responsible for nothing. Listen, I have a problem with you at the RCMP. There's never any answer to any question. asked by whether you're talking about the sponsorship scandal, anything. We never get any answers from you.
Mr. Grant, I've already given you an extra minute and a half, and I'm glad I did. It was good. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm going to continue on that because we're talking about the G8, G20 summit. This was a federal exercise. And, you know, there's no federal inquiries going on, save what's happening at this committee. Every other board that's looking into this is either a provincial or a municipal one. We have before this committee, we have the Minister of Public Safety, we have the Special Advisor, Mr. Alcock, we've got the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, and we have the Commander of the Integrated Security Unit, and I must tell you that all I hear is that someone else has the answers. Now, so I'm going to try to be focused here. Mr. Alcock, the question that Mr. Canio was asking the Minister was about the choice of 2 sites, and my understanding of the Minister's evidence was quite clear, that he was very clearly saying this was your advice to him, to have 2 sites. Is that correct or not? Was that your advice?
Mr. Chairman, the Minister is the Minister for Public Safety, and he is referring to the kinds of advice that I gave him, which was in respect of security matters. But as I've already said, the decision on whether it would be 1 site, 2 sites, or which site it would be is a decision for the government, not for a single minister. It was a decision by the government and depended upon a number of streams of advice, one of which was security. But security was not the sole and deciding factor.
I'm no security expert, but it would seem to me that 1 site's easier to secure than 2. Is that correct?
That's a generalization, Minister, and can, Honourable.
Not yet.
Mr. Chairman, yeah. Mr. Chairman, that's a generalization that I'm not actually sure I'm quite ready to go to. The reality is usually 1 site is better, but it can depend upon what you're confronted with, the nature of the site, and so on. The reality has a way of intruding, Mr. Chairman.
Now, Chief Superintendent McNeil, I appreciate the difficulty, but as the head of the Integrated Security Unit, my understanding is you brought together, there were brought together, I think up to 10 different entities that were responsible for security, including a number of federal entities, the RCMP, CSIS, the Canadian Forces, among others. Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Who's responsible for their actions and behavior?
Each agency is responsible, in each person, it starts with the individual. Each individual is responsible for their own actions and behavior.
I mean, ultimately, who's responsible?
Their own agency would be responsible for them.
Now, I had 2 young students from Kelowna, BC, who came to see me. They were sleeping in the gym at the University of Toronto, and they were awakened with 100 other people at 6 in the morning by police bursting in with their guns drawn. They were kicked in the ribs. They were arrested, saying every one of them was under arrest for conspiracy to commit a criminal act. Now, I'm wondering, that doesn't just happen by an officer who wakes up one morning and decides that they're going to go arrest 100 people. Who would have been responsible for making a decision like that to do a mass arrest of sleeping students at the University of Toronto?
As I stated earlier, if the arrest, we talked about the jurisdictional responsibilities earlier. The Toronto Police Service retains jurisdictional responsibility for the City of Toronto. I'm coordinating the event. The RCMP is the lead to make sure that security is provided. I look at everyone's operational plans before the event. We go over the plans, and at the end of the day, I will sign off and say I'm satisfied. We have adequate personnel.
Sir, I respect your answer, but you're not answering my question. No. I'm just trying to find out who would have been responsible for making a call like that. You're a security person.
I'm trying to get to that, just so I can explain it. So just so you understand why, I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'm trying to explain my role and my responsibility. My role and responsibility is to bring all of those people together. But Toronto Police Service, the OPP, Peel Regional Police maintain their jurisdictional responsibilities. If they would coordinate. If there was a arrest,
I'm sorry to interrupt again. I only have 5 minutes, so that's why we have to. I understand, but you're not answering my question. Who would be responsible for a decision like that?
Toronto Police Service, if it's in the Toronto, if the arrest occurred in Toronto, it's Toronto Police Service.
But sir, the whole summit occurred in Toronto, and there were military, there was RCMP, there was CSIS. You're saying that Toronto Police were responsible for all the decisions that were made?
Not every decision. It depends on what the decision is. As I stated earlier, if we're moving motorcades in the city, it'd take me a long time to explain, but there's 3 specific areas of responsibility. One is what we call the controlled access zone. That means the area around the the conference center where the center was actually, or the conference was actually held. That's the total jurisdiction of the RCMP during the event. Then there's a restricted access zone, a little bigger area that took in the hotels. You can draw another circle on a map around that. That again is RCMP jurisdiction. Outside that circle, we now get into what's called an interdiction zone, and then the rest of the city, and that's the Toronto Police Service.
Okay. Now, you mentioned civil liberties.
Mr. Davies?
Okay. And the right of people to protest. This was the largest mass arrest in Canadian history. 900 Canadians, innocent Canadians, were arrested and then let go. Not thugs and hooligans, but bystanders and people who were peacefully protesting, journalists, lawyers. Do you have anything to tell this committee about whether this was a success or a failure from a security point of view, which I imagine public safety also includes the right of people to safely protest?
Davies?
Is that what's your comment on that?
The security operation, we went into this security operation with several goals. One being to protect the people of Toronto and to protect the internationally protected persons who came. The second, another goal was to ensure that the conference and the summits were able to continue. From a security standpoint regarding the protection of the IPPs and the conference, it went off without a hitch. This doesn't always happen. In parts of the world, there are disturbances and roads blocked, people can't get to meetings. There was nothing delayed. We set our fences where we did in order to secure a specific area of the city, and we were successful in doing that. We were very successful. The question that you've asked about arrests, those things will have to be answered by someone else. I can tell you the operation was very successful. The decision on whether the arrests are justified in that is not for me to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNeil. We'll now move to Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Lobb.
I'll share the time with Mr. Lobb. Mr. Alcock, I'd just like to give you a little quote from a newspaper just to indicate that no less authority agreed with you or whoever made the decision about Huntsville, and maybe my friends opposite will appreciate the context. It says, this is from the Huntsville Forester, September the 17th, 2008. Very clear that when we are the Government of Canada, the next G8 summit will be held at Deerhurst Resort in Huntsville. You heard it from me. The G8 summit will be in this community when we form the next government, and that was Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff. So you can see, folks, the choices, they were shared choices. Mr. Lobb.
Thank you very much for attending today, and I can imagine how pleasant it is to answer questions from 6 Monday morning quarterbacks. We all know everybody's a lot smarter after the game on Sunday. In the riding I represent, there isn't one town or city that's over 10,000 people. This question is for Mr. Alcock. For the benefit of the 6 people, for the benefit
Point of order.
on the other side of the table here.
On a point of order. Madame
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais vous rappeler
I'd like to remind you, Mr. Chairman, that all members in the House and all members around this table are fully entitled to ask questions, and I do not appreciate the term that was translated for Monday morning quarterback or gérant d'estrade. That expression would not apply to colleagues one respects. You might not share the same opinions as your colleagues, but I think it is unacceptable to speak in these terms.
I'll check the book, but as far as I know, Monday morning quarterback is not unparliamentary. So I think we all understand what the reference means. It means looking back.
Pas en français, Monsieur le Président.
Well, I mean,
Not in French, Mr. Chair.
go ahead, Mr. Lobb.
Thank you, and there are other terms that you can use instead of that. The complexity of trying to arrange housing and safe accommodation for 10,000 people must be quite staggering, and I just want you to elaborate a little more on that. And again, the Monday morning quarterbacks on the other side, they struggled to get 100 and some people to vote the right way. Can you explain to the committee and for Canadians how owners of a task it is to try and lay the infrastructure and housing for 10,000 people?
I think actually, Mr. Chairman, Chief Superintendent McNeil may be able to give you a better answer even than I can. The reality is that it is a huge challenge. I believe in the case of Seoul, for example, they expect to have over 50,000 security folks. I think they're going to put them in tents, but I'm not sure what their plans are. It is a very difficult challenge. It was a challenge, particularly for the G8, because it is a more rural area and there isn't sufficient hotel infrastructure, motel infrastructure that you could use. In the case of Kananaskis, there was, and we didn't, therefore there wasn't a temporary site built. But in the case of the G8, obviously a temporary accommodation facility was required. In Toronto, there was infrastructure that could be used to put RCMP officers in and other police force members into.
Thank you. More time yet?
Yep, you got that.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. McNeil. With 20,000 security personnel that were tasked with the safety and security of the protesters as well as the people attending the G20, and you've quoted yourself, you've made your points that other than a few broken windows and a few police cars being damaged, that is really the extent of the damage from the G8 and G20. Certainly from your perspective, that must be a huge success, as there were no major injuries and certainly no loss of life. I wondered if you could comment on that.
Well, I agree that, as I stated earlier, and I stand by it, the security operation was a huge success. We were very, very fortunate that there weren't serious injuries. When you have that many people on the street, the potential is always there, and as you know, in major events such as this in the past, there have even been deaths. So I was very pleased with that aspect of the summits.
You have 2 minutes.
Has there been frustration amongst your members from the undue criticism from politicians? Is there frustration there?
No. Members of the RCMP and the members of the Integrated Security Unit are very professional people. They're willing to listen to anyone's complaints. We have systems in place to accept complaints. If you come to our detachments across Canada, you'll see a form you can fill out to make a complaint if you think that there's anything that's been done that the police shouldn't have done. So that's not. We're public servants, and we're used to scrutiny, but we're also very professional, and we all feel good about the job we did, and we're proud of what we did. And I'm very proud of the members of the Integrated Security Unit.
Yeah, we're very proud of you too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobb. We'll now move to Mr. Holland.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're not getting any answers on accountability. There just seems to be a lot of fingers pointing in other directions. Let me try on costs. Now, if I could, Mr. McNeil, there's huge cost figures there, and the reason we're told for why we can't get at specific details is bills are still coming in. Now, the frustrating thing here is that for things that we do have bills for, it doesn't seem like the bills are coming in. It's just that the details are not forthcoming. One example was the glow sticks, and you provided some information saying it was used by the Canadian forces, and yet the minister had said, and even Mr. Alcock had said, that it was inappropriate, were the exact words, to use the Canadian forces for these sorts of things. But let me continue down the list. I mean, if we're talking about high-end furniture, $315,000, rooms and food at Yorkville's Park Hyatt Hotel, $85,000, one bill alone for snacks at the Pickle Barrel, $17,275. What are the reasons we can't get the breakdown of this? And can you understand when more than $1 billion was spent that Canadians would want additional information?
Yes, I understand that, and that's one of the reasons I'm happy to be here today, to try and explain some of the numbers that I've heard. When it comes to the...
Just to be clear, I don't want you today to go through a roll call. I'm saying, like, it has been 4 months of an archaeological expedition to try to get these receipts pulled out of the ground. And all I'm saying is, open it up. I mean, let us see how this thing got to the price tag it's at. I mean, we keep hearing, and what really concerns me about it is there's a defense of it saying, this is what the cost is. I mean, so A, can you provide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kenya, but A, can you provide a breakdown of these costs. Not just, isolated one-offs that I'm talking about here, but anything that there's no, that you're not waiting for a bill for, because I don't know what you'd be waiting for a bill for anyway. And the second comment is, how do you feel about this cost? Is this the new bar? I mean, should we expect every time that when Canada hosts a G20, unlike every other country that hosts a G20, that these are the kind of costs that we should expect? Is this a new bar Canadians should expect going forward?
Thank you. I can answer the question, actually. If the RCMP cost in this particular summit was $507 million, that's based on, and I'll just explain as quickly as I can how we come to that cost. If you picture, as I said earlier, there's all the sites, there's 40 sites involved in the G8 and the G20. What we do is we send a team out to each site, an operational team. They go to the site, they assess the site, and they do what's called a vulnerability risk assessment on the site. They come back to me and to our planning team, and they say, this is what it's going to take to secure that site. X number of police officers, X number of amount of equipment. We take that amount, we scrutinize it, we go over it, we say, okay, can you do it with less? Because we are obviously concerned with costs, but we're also concerned with the number of resources. I don't mean to interrupt, but because the time's limited, maybe you can just provide me a yes or no to this. A, can you provide the costs? Yes, I can.
Okay. B, can you tell me, is this the new bar? Should we expect these kind of costs for summits going forward?
I'll take the second question first, if I may. I feel confident that the costs in this case were justified. Very confident, and based on that formula that I just told you that we use to secure every site. As far as RCMP costs go, as I said, we projected $507 million. We actually have spent to the last period, which is just a month or so ago, $329 million of that $507 million. So I can actually tell you, what we are waiting for, if I can, without getting into it too much, we have some MOUs with municipal partners that still have to come in, Toronto Police Service, but we also we're going to gain some money back too, because some of the assets we purchased, we're going to be able to sell, recoup some money, so the number is fluctuating a little bit, and that's why we can't give you an exact number right now, but 329 was up to the end.
Okay, but if I'm just saying, if you could give us costs as you have them, and certainly your estimates of the others, because you would not have agreed to just give a blank check. There would have been some estimate or some agreement around what those costs would be. Of course, you'd pay the bill later. Mr. Kenya.
Thank you. Did Mr. Alcock, Madam Morin, and Chief Superintendent McNeil, did either of you provide advice to the Minister of Public Safety or the Conservative government to split the summits between Huntsville and Toronto, yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, as I said, the decision on the summit, on where the summit would be, is a Government of Canada decision. Advice was provided from a number of streams, one of which was security. The security advice in some cases would be positive or negative in respect of a specific site. But at the end of the day, the decision on whether a site is chosen, whether another site is chosen, whether it's one site or two sites, is a Government of Canada decision.
Did anyone else want the same? All right, we'll now move to Mr. Rathgerber.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your attendance here today and for the good job that you do in protecting Canadians. I'm always concerned when members opposite are overly critical of security and police forces, and especially in a difficult time like policing in G8 and G20. So I join with my friend Mr. Lobb and the members on this side of the table for commending primarily you, Superintendent McNeil, because you were the operations director of this operation, for all of the men and women under your command and for the other forces that were coordinated in that effort. I know it was a difficult job, and I think you ought to be commended for your efforts. I do have a couple questions. Again, my friends on the opposite side of the table are frequent to find individuals who claim to be aggrieved by some of those operations and the tactics of some of those people that may have been under your charge, but I suspect, in fact, we're not under your charge, given the jurisdictional realities that exist in this operation. So my specific question, Superintendent McNeil, is this: are you aware of any complaints against members of the RCMP? Are there any files pending before the RCMP Complaints Commission?
I'm not aware of anything specific, but I don't want to say that I'm absolutely not aware. I'm just not aware, but I don't know if there is
to your
anything.
knowledge, I know it's not it may not be a complete answer, but to your knowledge, you're not aware of any. I'm not aware of any.
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Thank you. And with respect to the operations itself, and I mean, I saw visions on TV that disturbed me of police cars being overturned and windows being vandalized and broken. Can you explain to me the concept that I understand is sometimes employed by protesters at these events? And I think the word is black bloc. Are you familiar with that term? Can you tell me what that means?
Well, black bloc is a tactic that is utilized by groups who dress normally in black. Their faces are covered. They blend in with the crowd, and then at some point in time dress in their black outfits and then break away and do what we saw at the G20. The type of damage we saw at the G20 is not unusual for black bloc tactics. Then once they're finished doing that, they blend back into the crowd, take off the black outfit, go back to the clothes they were wearing before, and they're very difficult to find because of that.
So I take it from that answer that black bloc was employed by protesters at the G20 in Toronto.
That's correct.
And from an operations perspective, I mean, how do you handle that situation? Realistically, how can you handle individuals who essentially camouflage themselves so that they're unidentifiable either by vision or by camera, and then, you know, engage in illegal acts and then camouflage themselves back to something inconspicuous? How do you handle that from an operation?
Well, fortunately, in the city of Toronto, many thousands of people that witnessed these acts came forward with photographs, videotape to assist the police. I can't talk about the specifics right now because much of this is still before the courts, but a lot of the information we gained was from the general public who were appalled by the actions they saw, and they felt that they should assist the police, and we appreciate that.
So you're telling me that peaceful protesters and other individuals just happen to be on the streets were assisting law enforcement in outing these black bloc protesters?
I don't know what their purpose was on the streets, if they were protesters or not, but members of the public did assist the police in identifying people, not just black bloc, people using black bloc tactics, but people that were committing offenses during that period of time.
And you might not know, but if you do, were these individuals local, or do you know, were they imported from other parts of Canada or perhaps other parts of the world to come here to protest, or were the black bloc operators Ontarians?
I don't really want to comment on that right now because a lot of the people involved may still be before the courts and there's charges.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Another minute. Mr. McKenzie.
Mr. Alcock, I think I heard you say a minute ago that they anticipate Seoul will have upwards of 50,000 security people?
I think it's actually 50,000 public order troops, which would, so that in fact those would be the people who would actually deal with demonstrations. The number of security folks would in fact be higher, broad security folks, but
so
public order troops would be somewhere in the region of 50,000.
My friends are focused on the cost, but I've looked at some numbers of costs of other summits, and I'm sure that you have. How would you compare the cost for two summits that in fact involved, I think the Canadian, a group led by John Manley is another group, and a youth business people. There were a lot of people involved in all of these things, but how would those costs compare with the international summits been held in other countries?
I think, Mr. Chairman, a good way to think about it is perhaps not only in terms of cost, because as I said earlier, different situations lead to different costings, and also different governments have different ways of accounting for specific expenditures. The reality is our security practices are not substantially different from other countries where summits have been held in the past. We're policing to essentially the same kinds of standards. It costs what it costs, and I'm sure I frankly, in response to the first part of your question, I have never been able to find a fully accounted picture of the cost for any summit, and indeed I think the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General have made the same kinds of comments, that it's very hard to find another example that is equally transparent and equally fully accounting for all of the expenditures. I simply haven't found it. But the reality is it does cost a fair amount when you cost all the items in.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Alcock. To round out the day, we will conclude with Ms. Morani. Vous avez 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to resume with Mr. McNeil. You were saying earlier on about a tactic that you called black bloc. You said that it was used by protesters. Can you state for a fact that out of the 900 people arrested, over 900 people, that these people used this black bloc tactic?
No, I'm not suggesting that the 900 people were all black bloc using black bloc tactics. Definitely not.
Can you tell us, based on your information, approximately how many people you would think were using these tactics?
I would say the number would be in the hundreds, but again, I'm not suggesting the 900 that were detained were all using black bloc tactics.
Having said that, Mr. Chairman, just to add a small point there, I think one of the key parts of black bloc tactics that is important to remember is crowd dynamics. And what the black bloc folks want to do is draw a wider number of the peaceful demonstrators into the protest.
Thank you for your details, sir.
Ma question était à Monsieur.
Now, my question was for Mr. McNeil. I have a number of questions, so I really don't want to go out and expand too much on this issue. At the RCMP, do you use individuals, agents provocateurs, like the police officers in civil garb? Do you have people like that in the RCMP?
No, we don't. Not for the purpose that the expression that you're using is used for. We have people in civilian garb who blend in with the crowd to advise us of the movement of the crowd and what tactics they may be using, but not to provoke or incite or anything of that nature.
D'autre part, vous disiez que vous aviez reçu des photos.
You also said that you had received photos, images, videos from the public, people that had taken these images, and that allowed you to level charges or bring charges. How come there were so few convictions then? If perhaps I misunderstood what you said, but why so few convictions, not charges, if you have so much evidence?
I can't speak specifically to the charges themselves or why there would be or wouldn't be convictions. That's before the courts, and I will leave that to the courts to decide.
Okay. D'accord.
Okay. Given that you are an experienced police officer, you know the law, you know human rights, do you think that to detain someone for 24 hours, 48 hours without access to counsel is normal here in Canada?
We don't detain, that it wouldn't be normal to detain people without counsel. I don't know if that happened. I wasn't there, I don't know, but if you're asking the question, do we always supply counsel to people when they're detained or arrested?
Est-ce que lorsque la GRC,
you know the RCMP very well. Is it customary, is it a practice to leave people for an 8-hour stretch without food, without any water, strip searching? Do you think this is normal behavior or not under the rule of law, strip searching, etc.?
If I may, I would like to refer to just a document from Toronto that talks about the Prisoner Processing Centre, and I asked the question, how was the centre designed during the course of our planning? And it was a collaborative effort involving both uniform and civilian members of the Toronto Police Services from areas such as divisional policing, the courts, investigative and facilities management. The design and concept was based on Toronto Police Service policies and procedures, legal analysis, current and previous best practices in the design by the design architects. So
Okay.
with all of those people involved, I'm sure there were systems in place to deal with the people that were arrested. The specific questions and the things you brought up before will have to be brought to the people in charge.
Ok, je vous remercie. Est-ce qu'on pourrait avoir ce document?
All right, could we get that document, please? Could we get that document, sir? If we could have that table before the committee.
Is it a public?
It's right now. It's simply an email that I received. I asked Toronto Police Service for it.
All right. So, but it's not. Is it something that you'd be willing to submit?
Pouvons-nous l'avoir?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Each of you for attending today, and as we continue throughout the study, if you want to go back over, and if you think after you've left here that perhaps you could have answered a different way, or there would be some information that should be available to this committee, I would ask you to please submit that to our committee. Again, thank you, committee. We are adjourned.